Zethkar's mandibles clicked nervously as he faced the Galactic War Council. The recording devices hummed around him, capturing every word for the historical archives. His carapace still bore scars from the human front, purple welts that would never fully heal. "Tell us what happened at Kepler 442b, Grand Marshal Vexthul commanded from her floating throne. The other council members leaned forward, their various alien forms creating a menagerie of curiosity and concern. Zethkar's compound eyes dimmed as he remembered. The humans, they were not what our intelligence reports claimed. We thought we understood warfare. We were wrong. The war had started 3 cycles ago when the hegemony discovered Earth, a small blue planet inhabited by bipedal mammals who had barely achieved faster-than-light travel. The humans possessed rich deposits of trilithium and occupied 17 strategic star systems. Standard protocol demanded their surrender or elimination. The initial assault went as planned, Zethkar continued, his voice trembling. Our fleet of 200 vessels approached their outer colonies. We sent the usual surrender demand, expecting immediate compliance. Most species submit when they see our superior numbers. But the humans had responded with a simple message broadcast across all frequencies. Come and take it. Admiral Crexton of the 3rd Assault Fleet had laughed at the primitive response. The humans had only 37 ships defending the system. Ancient fusion drives, crude kinetic weapons, and basic energy shields. By all calculations, the battle should have lasted 6 standard hours. It lasted 6 months. Their ships were inferior, Zethkar explained to the council, but they fought like creatures possessed. When we disabled their engines, they continued firing. When we breached their hulls, they kept fighting in vacuum. When we boarded their vessels, they... He paused, mandibles chattering involuntarily. What did they do? Grand Marshal Vexthul pressed. They booby-trapped everything. Corridor walls, door panels, even their own dead bodies. A human would pretend to surrender, approach our boarding party, then detonate an explosive device hidden in his chest cavity. They called it a suicide vest. We lost 3 companies to such tactics before we learned to vaporize any human on sight. The council members exchanged worried glances. Such fanatical resistance was unprecedented in their conquest history. Zethkar's account continued with the ground invasion of Kepler 442b. The planet was strategically vital, containing the largest trilithium refineries in human space. Intelligence suggested a population of 2 million humans defended by perhaps 50,000 soldiers. We landed with the 47th Assault Corps, 400,000 of the hegemony's finest warriors, Zethkar said. The humans met us on the beaches with primitive chemical projectile weapons. We should have overwhelmed them in the first hour. But the humans had prepared. Every building was a fortress. Every street was a killing field. Children as young as 12 cycles carried weapons and knew how to use them. Elderly humans, some barely able to walk, operated heavy weapons from concealed positions. They used the planet itself as a weapon. Zethkar's voice grew hollow. Underground tunnels connected every building. They could disappear in one location and emerge behind our lines. When we thought we had secured a district, human fighters would pop up from storm drains, basement windows, even from inside walls. The humans had a saying that became legend among hegemony forces. Every Marine is a rifleman. But Zethkar learned it went deeper than their military. Every human was a potential soldier. Teachers, doctors, engineers, even artists took up arms when their world was threatened. We controlled the sky, but they owned the ground, he continued. Our air support was useless in urban combat. When we leveled buildings, they fought from the rubble. When we used plasma bombardment, they went underground. When we flooded the tunnels, they moved to the sewers. The siege of New Geneva lasted 43 days. Hegemony forces outnumbered the defenders 10 to 1, yet progress was measured in meters, not kilometers. Every room required a separate battle. Every stairwell was defended to the death. They never retreated, Zethkar said, his voice barely above a whisper. Not once. When ammunition ran low, they used clubs and knives. When those broke, they used bare hands and teeth. I watched a wounded human female, bleeding from multiple plasma burns, continue firing even as she died. The human defenders employed psychological warfare that shattered hegemony morale. They played music during firefights, ancient songs called rock and roll that seemed to energize them while unnerving their enemies. They left graffiti on walls. Remember the Alamo, death before dishonor, and simply Molon Labe. What does that mean? Asked Counselor Rixpol. Come and take them, Zethkar replied. It was their answer to everything. Surrender demands, peace negotiations, even offers of clemency. Always the same response. Come and take them. The humans had another tactic that proved devastatingly effective. They studied their enemies, learned hegemony languages and customs, then used that knowledge against them. Human snipers would call out individual soldiers by name before killing them. Propaganda broadcasts in perfect Zeftari dialect would play over loudspeakers, describing in graphic detail what happened to captured hegemony officers. They learned faster than we anticipated, Zethkar admitted. Within weeks, human fighters had captured our weapons and turned them against us. Their engineers reverse-engineered our plasma rifles, improved them, and mass-produced superior versions. What took our scientists decades to develop, they replicated and enhanced in months. The breakthrough came when human forces captured a hegemony communications hub. Instead of destroying it, they used it to broadcast false orders throughout the invasion force. Entire battalions received contradictory commands. Supply convoys were redirected to human-controlled territory. Reinforcements arrived at empty coordinates, while critical positions went unsupported. The humans had a term for it. Fog of war, Zethkar explained. But they didn't just endure it, they weaponized it. They created confusion, spread misinformation, and turned our own communication systems against us. The final blow came during what humans called the Night of Falling Stars. Using captured hegemony shuttles and disguised as wounded soldiers, human special forces infiltrated the orbital command station. The assault was coordinated with ground-based attacks on key installations. In one night, they destroyed our command structure, our supply lines, and our orbital support, Zethkar said. But the worst part was not the military defeat. It was the realization that we had awakened something we didn't understand. The evacuation of Kepler 442b became a rout. Demoralized hegemony forces abandoned equipment and fled for the extraction points. Human fighters pursued them relentlessly, striking from shadows and disappearing like ghosts. No retreat was safe, no position was secure. They followed us into space, Zethkar's voice cracked. Small ships, barely more than atmospheric craft, somehow reached orbit and attacked our fleet. Suicide runs directly into our engine cores, ramming attacks that should have been impossible with their technology. The Grand Marshal leaned forward, her mechanical voice harsh. How many casualties did the 47th Corps sustain? Zethkar's mandibles clicked once before he answered. Total casualties, 372,000. Survivors, 743. A shocked silence filled the council chamber. The mathematics were incomprehensible. The hegemony's most elite fighting force had been virtually annihilated by a technologically inferior enemy. The humans suffered massive casualties too, Zethkar added quickly. Perhaps half their population died defending that one world, but they considered it a victory. They called it acceptable losses and prepared to do it again on every human world. Counselor Rixpol's tentacles writhed nervously. Surely this was an anomaly. One fanatical world cannot represent their entire species. Zethkar's laugh was bitter and mechanical. That was our mistake. We thought Kepler 442b was exceptional. But intelligence reports from other fronts told the same story. The word remember haunted every hegemony ship that heard it. Within hours, human vessels began appearing throughout their territory. Not invasion fleets, but small groups of fighters that struck like lightning and vanished into the void. Zethkar continued his testimony, his voice growing stronger as he recalled the events that followed. We discovered that humans had been preparing for this moment since first contact. While we planned invasion routes and calculated resource values, they studied us. Every diplomatic meeting, every trade negotiation, every cultural exchange, they were learning our weaknesses. The Grand Marshal's mechanical fingers drummed against her throne. Impossible. Our security protocols are absolute. Your security protocols assumed rational behavior, Zethkar replied. Humans don't think like us. Where we see impossible odds, they see interesting challenges. Where we calculate acceptable losses, they see opportunities for glory. The human counteroffensive began simultaneously across 17 star systems, not with massive fleets or superior technology, but with something the hegemony had never encountered: coordinated asymmetric warfare on a galactic scale. They called it the Long Hunt, Zethkar explained. Human strike teams infiltrated our supply convoys using captured identification codes. They posed as merchants, diplomats, even refugees. When our ships stopped to investigate distress signals, humans would board disguised as maintenance crews and sabotage our systems from within. The humans had studied hegemony psychology and exploited their enemies' rigid thinking. Military doctrine demanded specific responses to specific threats, but humans refused to follow predictable patterns. They improvised constantly, adapting to each new situation with frightening creativity. On Vega Prime, they convinced our occupying force that they had surrendered, Zethkar continued. Human leaders attended peace negotiations wearing ceremonial robes that concealed military-grade explosives. The blast destroyed our entire command staff and most of the planetary garrison. But the explosion was just the signal. Hidden human forces simultaneously attacked every hegemony installation on the planet. Communications arrays, landing pads, supply depots, everything went up in flames within minutes. The few survivors found themselves trapped on a hostile world with no way to call for help. The humans didn't want to rule us, Zethkar said, his mandibles clicking rapidly. They wanted to teach us a lesson. Every captured hegemony soldier received the same treatment: medical care for their wounds, adequate food and shelter, then release with a simple message to carry home. The message was always the same: leave and never come back. The psychological impact devastated hegemony forces more than any military defeat. Soldiers who expected execution or slavery instead received mercy, coupled with an implicit threat. The humans could have killed them all, but chose not to. The message was clear: we can destroy you whenever we choose. Human intelligence networks were unlike anything in our experience, Zethkar explained to the increasingly worried council. They recruited allies from species we had conquered, offering them freedom in exchange for cooperation. Suddenly, our own subjects were working against us. The hegemony found itself fighting a multi-species rebellion coordinated by human military advisors. Techniques that worked on one front proved useless on others, as humans shared their knowledge freely with anyone willing to fight for independence. They taught the Alteri how to build improvised explosive devices from common minerals, Zethkar said. They showed the Kepler refugees how to hack our computer systems. They even trained the peaceful Xerion traders to become saboteurs and spies. Each success inspired more rebellion. Worlds that had been pacified for decades suddenly erupted in violence. Supply lines became death traps. Administrative centers turned into fortresses under siege. The hegemony's vast empire began crumbling as subject species remembered they had once been free. But the worst part was their patience. Zethkar's voice dropped to almost a whisper. We expected quick strikes and rapid retreats. Instead, humans would position snipers outside our bases and wait for weeks. A single human marksman could pin down an entire battalion just by taking one shot per day at precisely the same time. The psychological warfare was relentless. Human fighters would leave playing cards near dead hegemony soldiers, always the ace of spades. They tagged buildings with countdown timers that never reached zero, keeping occupying forces in constant fear of impending explosions. They played funeral music from hidden speakers during shift changes. They studied our burial customs and began leaving our dead arranged according to traditional rites, Zethkar explained. It should have been respectful, but instead it felt like mockery. They were showing us that they understood our culture well enough to use it against us. The tide turned decisively at the Battle of Wolf 359. A human fleet of 12 ships encountered a hegemony war flotilla of over 90 vessels. By all tactical calculations, the engagement should have been a massacre favoring the hegemony. The humans used our formations against us, Zethkar recalled. They scattered sensor drones throughout the system that perfectly mimicked ship signatures. Our targeting computers couldn't distinguish between real vessels and false contacts. We wasted ammunition shooting at phantoms while the real human ships positioned themselves for killing strikes. When the hegemony fleet finally realized the deception, it was too late. Human ships had maneuvered into knife-fighting range where their inferior weapons became effective, but even more shocking was their tactical coordination. Each human ship fought like it was part of a single organism, Zethkar said. No hesitation, no confusion, no contradictory orders. When one ship took damage, another immediately moved to cover its position. When ammunition ran low, they shared resources in real time. It was like fighting a single entity with 12 bodies. The battle lasted only 43 minutes. When the debris cleared, 11 human ships remained operational while the hegemony flotilla was completely destroyed. The surviving human commanders transmitted their report using captured communication equipment. "We are coming home." The message reached Earth faster than any hegemony ship could travel. By the time evacuation orders reached outer territories, human expeditionary forces had already begun their advance toward hegemony space. They called it the Great Return, Zethkar continued. Not conquest or invasion. Return. As if those star systems belonged to them by right. As if we were the invaders in our own territory. The human advance differed from traditional military campaigns in every possible way. Instead of overwhelming force, they used precision strikes. Instead of occupying territory, they liberated it and moved on. Instead of demanding tribute, they left worlds better defended than they found them. Every system they liberated became a recruitment center, Zethkar explained. Species that had suffered under hegemony rule volunteered to join the human cause. Our former subjects became their allies, sharing intelligence and providing bases for further operations. The strategic implications were terrifying. The hegemony faced not just human forces, but a growing coalition of liberated worlds. Each victory brought new allies, new resources, new knowledge of hegemony tactics and weaknesses. "We tried to negotiate," Zethkar said. "The High Command sent diplomatic missions offering to withdraw from human space in exchange for peace. The humans refused every offer. Their response was always the same. Complete hegemony withdrawal from all occupied worlds, reparations for war damages, and trials for war crimes. Anything less was rejected without discussion. They wanted justice, not victory," Zethkar realized. For humans, the war wasn't about territory or resources. It was about principle. They fought because they believed far the council chamber fell into absolute silence. Planet killers were weapons of last resort, banned by every civilized species in the galaxy. Their use represented the complete abandonment of honor and military ethics. "The target was New Normandy," Zethkar continued, his voice hollow with remembered horror. A human agricultural world with no military installations. Population, 4 million civilians, mostly farmers and their families. The decision came from the highest levels of hegemony command. If humans valued every life so highly, then the threat of mass civilian casualties might force them to negotiate. The planet killer, Divine Retribution, moved into position above New Normandy and broadcast ultimatum terms to every human world. Complete surrender within 1 standard day, or New Normandy dies, Zethkar recited. The humans had 6 hours to respond. The response came in less than 2. Every human military unit in the galaxy received the same order simultaneously. Remember New Normandy. But instead of surrender, it was a call to action. The humans had made their choice. What we didn't understand, Zethkar explained to the horrified council, was that humans had been planning for exactly this scenario. They called it the Samson option. The willingness to destroy everything rather than submit to tyranny. Hidden throughout hegemony space, human sleeper agents activated simultaneously. Not soldiers or spies, but ordinary civilians who had been prepared for this moment. Teachers, doctors, maintenance workers, even children, all carrying dormant programming that activated with the New Normandy ultimatum. They had infiltrated everything. Zethkar's voice carried grudging admiration. Government offices, military bases, industrial centers, even our homeworlds. For months, these humans had lived normal lives while secretly preparing for mass sabotage. The coordinated strikes began exactly 1 hour before the New Normandy deadline. Every hegemony world experienced simultaneous attacks on critical infrastructure. Power grids failed. Communication networks crashed, transportation systems ground to halt. But the real target wasn't our infrastructure, Zethkar realized. It was our planet killers themselves. Human infiltrators had identified the location of every weapon of mass destruction in the hegemony arsenal. While the High Command focused on New Normandy, human saboteurs struck the facilities that built, maintained, and controlled planet killers. The attack on Divine Retribution came from within, Zethkar said quietly. A human maintenance technician named Sarah Chen had been working on the ship for 8 months. She knew every system, every security protocol, every vulnerability. Chen's suicide mission succeeded beyond all expectations. Instead of simply disabling the weapon, her sabotage caused a cascade failure that destroyed the entire ship and its escort fleet. The explosion was visible from New Normandy's surface, a brief star that marked the death of 4,000 hegemony personnel. But that was only the beginning, Zethkar continued. Within 6 hours, 17 planet killers had been destroyed or disabled. The remaining weapons were rendered useless as their command and control networks collapsed under cyber attacks. The humans had not just prevented genocide, they had eliminated the hegemony's ability to threaten civilian populations. The psychological impact was devastating. If humans could reach the most secure weapons in the galaxy, nowhere was safe. The war changed after New Normandy, Zethkar said. Before, it was about conquest and resistance. After, it became about survival and revenge. Human forces abandoned all restraint. No longer content with liberation and defense, they began systematically hunting down every hegemony military unit in the galaxy. The Long Hunt became a war of extermination. They called it the Reckoning, Zethkar explained. Every hegemony officer who had participated in the invasion was marked for death. Not capture, not trial, execution. They published lists with names, photographs, and last known locations. The human intelligence network proved far more extensive than anyone had imagined. They tracked fleeing officers across multiple star systems, following leads and hunting with patient determination. No hiding place remained secret for long. General Crixthal thought he could disappear on Tau Ceti, Zethkar recalled. He changed his identity, underwent physical modification, even learned to speak with a different accent. The humans found him in 3 weeks. The execution was public and broadcast throughout hegemony space. No torture, no humiliation. Simply a quick death preceded by a reading of charges. The message was clear. Justice would be swift, but inevitable. "We lost 40% of our officer corps to human death squads," Zethkar said. "Not in battle, not in combat, hunted down like criminals and executed wherever they were found." Remaining hegemony forces began surrendering in massive numbers, not because they were defeated militarily, but because they were terrified. The humans had proven they could reach anyone, anywhere, at any time. "The final blow came at the Battle of Rigel," Zethkar continued. "Our last major fleet, 200 ships under Admiral Vexagoth, made a desperate attempt to reach the hegemony core worlds. The human response was swift and overwhelming. Not just military vessels, but an entire coalition of liberated worlds sent ships to intercept the fleeing fleet. Over 800 vessels from 50 different species converged on Rigel system. "But the humans did something unexpected," Zethkar said. "They offered terms. Complete surrender, full accountability for war crimes, and reparations for all damaged worlds. In exchange, surviving hegemony personnel would receive fair trials and the possibility of rehabilitation rather than execution." "Admiral Vexgoth accepted immediately," Zethkar admitted. "The entire fleet surrendered without firing a shot. 200 ships, 90,000 personnel, surrendering to an enemy they had once considered primitive. The war ended not with a climactic battle, but with a ceremony. Human representatives accepted the hegemony surrender on New Terra, a world they had liberated early in the conflict. Former slaves and freed worlds sent delegates to witness their oppressors' defeat. "But the humans surprised us again," Zethkar said. "Instead of revenge or humiliation, they offered partnership. The terms were generous beyond imagination. Hegemony worlds that renounced conquest and adopted democratic governments could join the growing federation of free worlds. War criminals would face trial, but ordinary citizens could start fresh. They called it the New Covenant," Zethkar explained. "Not conquest, but cooperation. Not subjugation, but liberation. They offered us what we had never given others, a chance at redemption." Some hegemony worlds accepted the offer. Others chose isolation. A few hardliners attempted to continue resistance, but without popular support, they were quickly defeated by their own people. "The humans kept their word," Zethkar admitted. "Former enemies became allies. Ex-slaves became equals. The galaxy became a place where freedom mattered more than strength." Grand Marshal Vexthul leaned forward, her mechanical voice softer than before. "What did you learn from this war?" Zethkar considered the question carefully before answering. "We learned that humans are not like us. They don't fight for territory or resources or dominance. They fight for ideas. They fight for principles. They fight for things they consider more important than their own lives." He paused, looking around the council chamber at the representatives of a dozen species. "We learned that underestimating humans is the last mistake you'll ever make. They seem weak until threatened. Then they become unstoppable. They seem primitive until challenged. Then they innovate beyond your wildest imagination. They seem divided until attacked. Then they unite with terrifying efficiency." Counselor Rixpol's tentacles writhed nervously. "But surely they have weaknesses?" "Yes," Zethkar replied. "They trust too easily. They forgive too quickly. They believe others share their capacity for change and redemption. These are not tactical weaknesses. They are moral strengths that make them dangerous allies and impossible enemies." The Grand Marshal's throne hummed as she processed this information. "What is your recommendation regarding future relations with humanity?" Zethkar's mandibles clicked once, a gesture of absolute certainty. Never again, he said firmly. Never fight them, never threaten them, never give them reason to remember you as an enemy. They offer friendship to those who deserve it, and destruction to those who don't. The choice is ours. He stood slowly, his scarred carapace catching the chamber's artificial light. The humans have a saying, peace through strength, but they understand that true strength comes from knowing when not to fight. They could have destroyed us completely. Instead, they chose to save us from ourselves. The council chamber remained silent as Zethkar gathered his notes and prepared to leave. One final thing, he added, turning back to address the council. The humans are coming here, not as conquerors but as teachers. They want to show us what they learned during their war, that freedom is not something you take, but something you give. As he walked toward the exit, Zethkar reflected on the strange twist of fate that had brought him to this moment. The species he had once considered primitive had become the galaxy's moral leaders. The war he thought would bring easy victory had instead taught hard lessons about courage, sacrifice, and the true meaning of strength. The doors sealed behind him with a soft whisper, leaving the council to contemplate their future in a galaxy where humans had proven that some things were indeed worth fighting for and worth dying for. In the end, they had called it war. But the humans had turned it into something else entirely, a lesson in what it meant to be truly civilized. The recording devices continued their silent vigil, preserving Zethkar's testimony for future generations. Somewhere in human space, children were learning about the war through stories their parents told them. But those stories weren't about victory or conquest. They were about the day their species chose to stand up for what was right, regardless of the cost. And in that choice, they had changed the galaxy forever. Edom was worth any price. This philosophical difference made the conflict impossible to resolve through traditional means. The hegemony could negotiate territorial disputes or trade agreements, but how could they compromise with an enemy that viewed the war as a moral crusade? The humans had a saying, "Death before dishonor," Zethkar quoted. We thought it was mere bravado until we realized they meant it literally. Human prisoners would die rather than provide useful information. Human civilians would destroy their own cities rather than see them occupied. Human soldiers would sacrifice themselves to save comrades they had never met. The Grand Marshal's voice carried a note of desperation. What finally stopped them? Zethkar's mandibles clicked sadly. We did. The Hegemony High Command made a decision that haunts us still. He paused, gathering strength for what came next. They authorized the use of planet killers, by Proxima Centauri held for 8 months against impossible odds. Alpha Centauri turned every asteroid in their system into a weapon. Earth itself. He paused, unable to continue. What about Earth? Grand Marshal Vexthal demanded. Earth never fired a shot. They didn't need to. By the time we approached their home system, word of our defeats had spread throughout human space. Every world was preparing. Every human was ready to fight. But Earth did something worse than resist. Zethkar's compound eyes focused on something beyond the council chamber, beyond the present moment. They sent us a message, one word, broadcast on every frequency, transmitted by every communications array in the system. A single word that changed everything. What word? The Grand Marshal pressed. Zethkar's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow filled the entire chamber. Remember.